Cybersecurity is a huge thing at the moment, but do you think criminals are more sophisticated? Is cybersecurity responding rather than stopping it happening?
Actually, we see both going on. I mean, in terms of attacks, you're right. We see a division between random speculative attacks, largely aimed at, let's say, bank consumers and tricking them into disclosing personal information in order to get access to their account. But increasingly over the last few years, we've seen targeted attacks which are aimed at businesses and specific organisations in some cases. With those kinds of attack, they're very bespoke. In other words, quite often the attackers have developed custom-built malicious code which isn't necessarily picked up routinely by antivirus protection. And that's why it's very important for organisations and banks, critically because they're dealing with money, to look for network activity, also to monitor incoming and outgoing email. Importantly, to recognise the fact that often, however sophisticated the attack, it starts by trying to trick individuals into doing something that jeopardises corporate security, and therefore getting employees on side, making sure that they understand the approaches that these targeted attackers take and what they can do to try and minimise their exposure to that risk. That's really, really important.
And when it comes to security, what's the bare minimum banks and organisations should definitely have in place?
Like any organisation, the bank needs to look at what its assets are, what mechanisms might be used by attackers to get into the organisation. So what are the potential weak points? From that, what do they need to do based on that risk assessment to actually block up those potential avenues into the organisation? And that's going to partly mean technology, so network monitoring, internet security software, protection against distributed denial of service attacks that might try and take down the bank's services and stop them operating. But equally, it includes procedural things. Maybe person A working in one department doesn't need access to Department B's assets. So trying to minimise it so that if there is an intrusion into one part of the organisation, they don't automatically get access into another part of it. So it comes down to good housekeeping as well, and it comes down to education as well, making sure that people in the organisation are resilient.
Do you think we actually know the sheer scale of the problem? Because I know a lot of banks in certain parts of the world don't actually have to disclose if they've had an attack. So, what's the situation in reality?
You're right. I think the real picture is much bigger than what we hear about. It's obvious that any organisation that is attacked is going to be very wary about disclosing that because of the impact on its reputation. And not every country has legislation in place which will compel a bank or other institution to declare if it's been compromised in some way. So yeah, I think we definitely get underreporting, so to speak, of these attacks. But there's enough actually that does surface to indicate that not only is this highly profitable, but it involves organisations of different kinds. So, the problem is real, and it's probably bigger than we realise from what gets reported.
And finally, putting banks to one side, how much are large organisations targeted? How concerned should they be?
The reality is that any organisation of any sort and any size could be a victim. And sometimes one organisation is used as a stepping stone to get to others that they have a connection with. So regardless of size, regardless of the sector that you work in, it's really important that all organisations look at their assets, look at what the potential risks are, and develop a wider strategy for minimising their exposure.